right.
second.
All right.
Now you're live. You should be live right now.
All right. Grand Rising for the second time, everyone. We had such a funky, glitchy experience a few minutes ago using Zoom. So now Jeff hooked up StreamYard, and we're going to try this again because we felt so bad about that.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, I'm a little thrown off.
There we go.
I don't have my Nag Champa. Now all this happened. So take it away, Jeff.
Okay. Yeah. We wanted to come back on and clean this up because it was the internet or Zoom. We're not really sure which one it was. So we figured we'd jump back on and do this on StreamYard, which is where we are now. And anyways, yeah, I'll do a quick recap here. What I was talking about is today is, of course, October 14th. And I recapped about how the world is really mirroring Uranus going over this fixed star Capitalgal. It's actually exact today. It's happening right now as we speak. And of course, look at what we're seeing. We've got Israel and Lebanon heaving, missiles at each other. Israel's ready to do an incursion into Lebanon. We've got the Middle East really heating up. Very dangerous situation. We've also got North Korea threatening to blow up roads into South Korea. And a lot of trouble over there brewing. We've got China surrounding Taiwan even more intensely with naval ships all around it. And I just heard a report that hasn't been reported much, and that is there has been more casualties, particularly with Russia, over in Ukraine in the last 2 months than there's been in the entire war that happened between Ukraine and Russia. So again, let's hope the astrology is wrong, or let's hope that the astrology doesn't manifest the last way it has in the past, which again was World War II, the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, and other times back through history. Every time about 80 something years, Uranus goes around about 84 to something years, Uranus goes into the Pleiades for a 7-year approximate period. That is the sidereal sign of Taurus for people who are familiar with that. And what's so important about this is that every time it happens, the world seems to become unhinged. Well, it's exactly what seems to be happening now. And let's hope it doesn't happen. Let's hope that maybe the proliferation of nuclear weapons and the deterrents are enough to keep people from getting into quote unquote a world war. We'll see what happens. I hope it certainly doesn't. Also, I was mentioning that we've had off the charts solar flares, and that maybe why we had such a horrible live a little while ago. It's disrupting a lot of servers. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but my cell phone has not been right. A lot of times I got to restart it and re-register it with the cell towers because we've had X-class solar flares that are off the charts right now. And many people were reporting that they could see the aurora lights, the aurora borealis lights, much farther south than they normally do. And I used to see that living in northern Wisconsin. It was pretty impressive to watch those lights dance up there in the sky. And that, of course, is the interference of the magnetics with our atmosphere and the ionosphere. So it's very, very powerful. And again, it's been stirring up a lot of violent weather. And also, no matter how much that's directed or not, but tough times right now. So I know, Ella, you had a question that we posed on the last live. Maybe we can hit that again.
Oh, yeah. We, Thursday, P. Smith was asking this question, and I really thought it was very interesting. I don't know if this is a man or a woman, but they're saying, if we are essentially energy, then how is it that when we still consider being human and the fact we no longer have a body to connect with, this person is referencing when we pass, and then he or she writes, our soul can take on any form. So you made sense of this.
I get it. Yeah. Our last live that we just did a little while ago, I went into a whole discussion about energy And, this person's using, it's a great question, by the way. And the reason why energy in physics is really not definable. And, I've had a lot of discussions with physicists about this, quantum physicists. And again, one of my more favorite physicists ever was Dr. Claude Swanson, who just passed away a few years ago. And he had written a lot of work about the manifestations of energy. We don't know what energy is. We certainly have it in various forms. And I have mentioned that heat is not energy. It's a manifestation of energy. Electricity is, again, a transmission of energy. No one knows what energy truly, truly is. And it's in so many forms, like when we light our stove, or you turn on the car, if it's an internal combustion engine, you have an explosion going on by gasoline being injected into the cylinder, a spark plug ignites, and we get an explosion. That's a releasement of energy. But what is energy? We really can't answer that. It's a very divine thing when you think about it. And in the last podcast, I had mentioned this diagram, which again is probably one of my most favorite. And I'm going to put the screen on here, and I'll put it up. I've got my diagrams all here in one spot. And I always love to go to the diagram, if I can find the right one here. This one right here. Yes. This is probably one of my favorite diagrams. And the reason why I had mentioned that, God, or however you want to call divinity, is above creation, and the souls are believed to be created right up here. If you can see my cursor at the very top, in the worlds of absolute. Well, to keep this simple and kind of truncated, these upper worlds are really where spirit is, and they're very divine. These are the upper heavens referred to in many of the sacred texts, including the Bibles. Well, with the Yetziratic world is known, if anybody's heard of a text called the Sefer Yetzirah, that means the book of formation. And I have to tell you, I've got several versions of it. The best translation I've seen to date was the one done by Ari Kaplan. If anybody wants to acquire that, it's an amazing translation. And it gets into, this is where time and space happen. This is where spirit gets concretized into the physical worlds. And I do use that plurally. So very, very interesting stuff. And why I mention this is because it's so important when we look at what is happening with energy manifested into the consciousness of a human being or an animal or whatever other physical form it takes, because the earth is an extremely divine place where spirit can manifest into the physical world. And, that gets into astrology, and it also gets into the various parts of the soul. And one of my favorite texts that I find is really lucid is a text called the Share Hagilgam, or Shar-ar Hagilgam. Share, or Shar-ar, means gate, and Hagilgam means cycling of the souls. It was actually written in the 14th century, it's not that old, by Rabbi Luria. And his, you could say, teacher or master was the Ari. It was known as the Rabbi Arizal. And profound text, because it is really a journey of the soul and the energy that gets put into what we call our spirit. And there's specific divisions. There's actually 5 divisions. And this is talked about in the Upanishads as well as the Sharia. And very, very interesting stuff. Because what it really gets into is the lower conscious mind is not us. It's what we think is us. And of course, we have our physical sensations, and we have our reality structures and our lives and our homes and our families and all these things, our jobs, our goals, our aspirations, which is very, very important, but it's really not us. And, when we talk about ghosts and disincarnate souls and NDEs, near-death experiences, which is a big buzzword right now, or OBEs, out-of-body experiences, and astral travel, we find that consciousness is not localized to the body, that it is clearly something separate. again, one of my favorite books I always refer to is The Magus of Strovolos. And there are many books that talk about this stuff. And that is that consciousness is really not us. It's the interface into this physical world. It's the keyboard, the mouse, and the screen, or the steering wheel, the gas pedal, and the brakes, if you will, that control our interaction with the five sense, three-dimensional world, which is what the Sefer Yetzirah is all about. And that gets into astrology and spirits and souls. And we tend to get trapped here. I'm going to put something on the screen real quick here because we do have limited time today. So I'm kind of going a little quicker. But one of my, again, favorite diagrams that I always like to go to is the one here I'll show you, which really breaks down what we call the conscious mind. And it's this, by the way, is the Sharia Gilgum for anybody who wants to know what that book is. It's actually acquirable on Amazon or any other place. And it now comes in a single volume. This is the older version, which is the 2 volumes, but really quite good. It breaks down an incredible look into who we are as souls. And it also, more importantly, speaks about, this is another text here I should have mentioned. It's called the Behir. The Behir is called the Book of Illumination. And that's what Behir means. And it's quite profound as well. It gets into many spiritual things. Again, this was translated by Ari Kaplan, a very, very interesting book to read. I'll tell you that. And of course, the Vedas also speak about this. I'm putting different texts up here, but I'm trying to find my, there it is. There's a diagram that I had referred to earlier that the Sharia Gilgum has. And I want to point this out because it's very interesting to astrologers. And this diagram that I have up right here, you can see the lower box on the right here is called the Nefesh. And you might say, well, what is that? Well, that's the conscious mind, which forms when we're born. It's not us. And this is why many people have deja vus or they have intuitions. And that is the spirit and the neshama and the upper portions of the soul bleeding down into what we call the conscious reality of this world. And notice right here, there's a circle at the very bottom. It's called Malachus. That is the earth. That's the Aramaic Hebrew word for earth, or the place where spirit manifests. This is the moon right here. It's called Yesod. And notice it says Hesed through Yesod. This might be hard to see because I don't have my pen on right now. But this is Mars. That's Jupiter. This is the sun. This is Venus. That is Mercury. And this is the moon. So it's really fascinating that the solar system is a matrix for, you could say, this reality system that we're in called Earth and life on Earth. And, you know, again, we had mentioned many skeptics of astrology. That I talked about how the religions really came down on astrology from the late 1600s forward, very hardly. And the reason why is because I think the churches were trying to stop the widespread use of magic. And they knew that these lower angels in the hierarchies of the planets was very connected to this. So very interesting and deep stuff, far deeper than we can get into in a truncated session like this. But I have to tell you, I love talking about this stuff because what it's really getting into is spirit put into matter. And that's what we are. That's what animals are, plants are, so on and so forth. And we are believed to be all evolving through our soul's journey. So it was a great question about how can energy, and that was the question the person had asked, is how can energy be attached to different forms? Well, if you read in the Sharia Gilgum, they talk about these angels that are kind of like dog catchers or policemen that actually catch the souls, that are the errant souls in the astral planes who wander or get confused after what we call a period of time. There really is no time. And what it does is these angels will actually try and grab the soul for moving on into different dimensions or reincarnation. It's very deep stuff, way beyond what I could cover in a short podcast. And no one really knows this stuff anyways, fully. It's very mysterious how the angels deal with souls and reincarnation. It's very complex. And anyways, a lot of souls will jump into other people's aura. That's called possession. And again, Dr. Carl Wickland's work and many of the books I talk about, the Unquiet Dead by Dr. Edith Fiore and Freeing the Captives and many, many other texts actually prove that psychiatrists and psychologists are and have discovered this stuff for many years. And again, the book I mention an awful lot is a book called The Menot Yehuda by Rabbi Yehuda.
Yeah. I just want to jump in for a second, Jeff. So the angels you're talking about are different from the angel on the ascendant, right?
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The angel, see, when you talk about angels and spirits, it's really hard to get into this in a definitive way because there's so many of them and there's so many classes of them and hierarchies. It's beyond human comprehension. If anybody wants to ever read a book called the Sefer Ratziel, if you can get some of the older translations, absolutely stunning. And it gets into the myriads of angels that are in all these different classifications we call hierarchies. And it's beyond human comprehension. But yeah, that's essentially what you could say would kind of scratch the surface on that topic. Is that what you meant?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yesterday you sent me I can't believe it. All these years, it wasn't until yesterday that you sent me my angel on the ascendant, right? You broke down what that all means. And it just, when you were talking about angels now, it just triggered that memory, which I'm really thinking about. Yeah.
Well,
and a lot of people ask, what's the difference?
Of angels is so deep. And see, that's what ancient astrology is. That's so different than modern astrology. One of my, again, more favorite astrologers was Rabbi Ibn Ezra. He's another 11th century astrologer. And it's a shame we lost our last podcast due to the internet. But, I was talking about some of the prolific documents that were saved between like 300 BC and the 400 AD period. There were many astrologers and philosophers and translators who had saved a lot of this ancient information, particularly between the 4th and the 8th centuries. I had mentioned a man named Mashallah, another one named Saul. These were actually Jewish astrologers who lived in the city of Baghdad. And they moved around a lot, but they were translators and didn't believe in astrology, particularly Saul. He was absolutely, against astrology because, again, here's that religious division between, well, it doesn't support God, because people, they think astrology actually negates God, which is exactly wrong because it proves divinity. It's just the myopic way modern astrology looks at astrology is astrology only, whereas ancient astrologers were astronomers that realized it was a modulating, you could say, effect on the energy we call the soul and the spirit, and that God was above it. It proved it. Many of your really prolific astronomers like Galileo, Newton, they were all into astrology, as we would call it today. In fact, they didn't even call it astrology back then. Most of them referred to it as astronomy. In fact, Guido Bonanni's text, which is known as the Book of Astronomy, is probably one of the most prolific astrological documents ever put together in the Middle Ages. It's like, I think it's close to 16 or 1700 pages. I've got it. They're like this. They're like a New York telephone book in 1975. And astounding. I mean, when you think about translating something like that or writing something like that, in the 11th century, you did not have Microsoft Word. You did not have photocopiers. You didn't have typewriters. This was quill pen and ink, next to a candle. So to put together something like that, the only ones that had the resources were the scholars and also the kingdoms who could fund this type of stuff. So really, really a lot of fun to look into this.
Oh gosh, yeah. And you know, nobody is going to tell me that the astrology isn't real. I mean, especially when you're going through challenging transits and progressions, which you know that I've got Neptune hovering over me, and it has been challenging, beyond challenging. I mean, you say that it can bring a spiritual guidance, but it also can bring a very dark cloud. I can tell you that, a very heavy dark cloud. It's
Yeah.
very challenging, very challenging.
Well, I often find I mentioned that a lot of clients I've seen over the years, including myself, when they have hard aspects between Neptune, the sun, or Neptune and Mars. My mother was studying medical astrology quite a bit, and because she was a specialist in hemodialysis and an RN, and then later she became a specialist in dialysis. And she really was attracted to medical astrology. And I've got a lot of her old books. And it's fun because I have seen these strange anomalies that all the king's men, meaning all the modern science in allopathic medicine, cannot figure out what's going on. And when these transits and progressions leave, so does the weird anomalies, whether it be some disease or strange little things that they can't figure out. I had one client years ago. I remember she called me from the hospital and she said, the doctors want to do exploratory surgery. And I said, well, I can't give you medical advice, but I could certainly look at what the chart says and you can make a decision from there. Because you got to remember, they can't operate on you unless you sign it, right? You got to agree to it. So she's in the hospital, really in a lot of pain. And I cast an interrogation, and I also was looking at her birth chart. And I said, you got some crazy progressions going on. And I said, they're going to end very soon. You're kind of at the peak of it. So she elected not to go with the exploratory surgery. They literally wanted to open her up and go into her abdomen and start looking around to see why these conditions were happening, the abdominal pain and so on and so forth. So she elected not to do it. And guess what? Just when the progressions and transits, I think there were progressions, this is about 20 years ago, cleared up, so did that pain. And I've seen this with psychological issues, physical issues, and also legal issues, etc. We've all go through our stuff on this physical world. That's for damn sure. And it's interesting how these cycles really parallel that. So it's not predicting the future. It's showing the releasement again of energy. Again, if you wanted to put a thumbnail to this podcast, I would call it a look into what is energy. We don't know what energy is. It's clearly the manifestation of divine forces solidified into very specific conscious, almost like separate beings. The Magus of Strovolos talks about this, how elementals literally are thought form elementals created by us that live on in the astral planes, and they actually live around us in what we call time and space. And this is why, again, the religions were not completely wrong. I agree with them on abolishing the magical practices, even though some people get irritated. Well, I like magic. We're all working magic divinely every single day when you have a thought and a goal. That's literally the manifestation of consciousness into a physical manifestation. Look at an architect. When they build a building, what's the first thing they do? Well, I want a building. Well, what do you want? Well, I want it this big and that big, and I want the kitchen here and the library there and the whatever else it is that you want, the bedrooms here, or whatever you're building. All causation is mental. It starts with consciousness, which is miraculously taking energy and putting it into organized form, which then becomes physically manifest. So profound stuff. So anyways, I'm going to let you take over for a minute. The camera, I got to recycle it. It never ends.
Yeah. Well, we've got a few questions coming in. And the first one's from Steve. Thanks for joining us, first of all, everyone, so much. Steve's asking, what's your view on prophecy?
Well, prophecy is another way of saying that we all pretty much... I've got a camera here that's going on. God, we are having a technical I'll tell you
I
that.
can't believe it.
Let's see. Oh yeah,
You're on a
that's
good
why we're
roll, Jeff.
redoing this podcast, is because we had so
I
much
mean,
internet problems before.
oh,
Now we got a camera that just will not come on. So let me see.
oh my goodness.
But anyways, I can answer
Well,
this in audio while the camera
yeah,
comes on,
yeah,
and that
please.
is literally prophecy could be, identified as seeing or predicting the future. I mean, we hear about the prophets in the Bible, Daniel, so on and so forth. And I have to say, it's the ability to see in the future, prophesizing, or,
Right.
it's another place where that all comes from. Yeah, this is crazy. I don't know what.
Maybe if you try to switch the view to
No. It's
that
not
will
that.
help.
My camera is out. See, it's black. So yeah.
Wow.
But yeah,
Well,
let me see if I can't get it going here.
just continue on with your audio. I
Yeah,
can't
right.
believe this.
I mean, we
For those
redid
of
this
you who
podcast.
didn't join us earlier, it was a mess, a hot
Oh, God,
mess with
total mess.
Zoom.
Yeah,
At
and it was, we think it's the internet. We don't know what it was. But yeah, prophesizing is someone who's able to speak to an angel. I mean, that's one manifestation. Other people psychically see. I mean, we see psychics and intuitives all the time who are constantly accessing, if you will, the astral worlds, right? So
Right.
one of the things that people believe is that if you access various different angels, this is why many people were saying it's very dangerous to go into the astral worlds, because some entities will trick you. There are many evil spirits and many things, and this is the things the religions were very careful about. I had mentioned John Dee earlier. Many people might be familiar with him. He is the one who was the conjurer, or if you will, seer or prophesizer for Queen Elizabeth, which was a very famous time, and a lot of things that happened there. Yeah, I've got a camera that's completely down. I cannot turn it on. This is crazy. So,
Yeah. Well,
yeah, the only thing I can say is we're going to finish in audio here, and
well, maybe so people don't have to just stare at me. You can switch it over to
yeah, right.
that's what's happening right now.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing I can do is work with this, because it is clearly off.
Yeah, well, we can roll like this. That's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
We can hear you perfectly fine.
Right. So we'll see what happens here. But anyhow, here, what I can do is, I got a dead camera here. I have no idea why this happened. We are just having the worst time here today. But, I can share a screen here, and that'll get us off the, staring at a no camera here. But, and I've got to go pretty soon anyhow. One of the things that I can show you here is my, again, favorite diagram, which really looks at what I would call the conscious mind, subconscious mind complex. And, when you look at this lower area down here, which is also known as the nefesh, which is the conscious mind, or what I like to call the present personality, which formed when we were little children forward. Well, psychic work or prophecy really seems to be accessing the upper astral dimensions, which there is myriads of angels, spirits, and intelligences who are very familiar with what time is. So it's deep stuff. And I can tell you, some prophets are very accurate. Like, we've heard so many, manifestations of different translators of Nostradamus, right? Like, Nostradamus says this, and I've actually seen some of them be really off in terms of timing. Most of them have been. It's like the Mayan calendar. The world was supposed to end in 2012. I remember, again, in the 1970s, I went in to watch The Late Great Planet Earth by Orson Welles.
Oh, yeah.
And I got to tell you, that went nowhere fast. It, we were all supposed to be wiped out by 1985. Axis tips, 1,000-mile-an-hour winds, nuclear war. And if that didn't get us, of course, the earthquakes and the rest of the plagues would. And none of it has been True, we have had earthquakes, we've had plagues, we've had wars, but we haven't had the horrific endings of the apocalyptic stuff that was predicted by some of these translators of Nostradamus. So deep stuff.
Yeah.
So I
Sure.
think we're going to end this now, but at least we did something. And I'm sorry it's fragmented. And God Almighty, what a day! It's
What a
Moon
day.
conjunct
What a
Saturn.
day.
Yeah,
Well,
what a day.
we have two really good questions here. I'm going to
Yeah,
save
we'll
these
pick it up Thursday,
for
and we should have all
Thursday.
this technology worked out. My God.
Jessica, your question, and Rocky Stucci Jr., your question. We're going to jump right into these on Thursday. Well, thanks, Jeff, for making a second attempt at our live today. This one is much better. At least you weren't glitchy, and
Yeah.
this one worked out much better. But thanks,
It
everyone,
was
so
better.
much.
Yeah, we were just more fragmented because we were trying to reassemble what, kind of organically happened this morning. So,
Yeah.
but at least it's there, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks,
but great
everyone.
questions.
Have a
Great
beautiful week.
questions.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Yep. We'll be on it on Thursday. Gosh, you need an IT